Nestled in the rolling hills of Willow Creek, Lake Serenity was more than just a body of water. It was the heart of the community. For decades, its shimmering surface reflected the dreams and memories of the families who lived along its shores. The lake was a haven for fishing, kayaking, and quiet evenings watching the sunset paint the water in hues of orange and pink. At its eastern edge stood an old wooden bridge, weathered but sturdy, connecting the two halves of the Willow Creek neighborhood. The bridge wasn't just a crossing. It was a symbol of unity, a pathway where neighbors waved to each other, where kids rode their bikes, and where summer festivals spilled over with laughter. I, Ethan Caldwell, had grown up in Willow Creek. My family's modest cabin sat on a small parcel of land at the northern tip of the lake, where the dam stood. My grandfather had built that dam in the 1950s, a labor of love to create Lake Serenity from a narrow river that once cut through the valley. The dam wasn't just a structure, it was my family's legacy, deeded to us along with the responsibility to maintain it. For years, I'd upheld that duty, ensuring the dam's gates were secure, the water levels balanced, and the lake healthy for everyone to enjoy. But Willow Creek wasn't the sleepy community it used to be. Over the past decade, the neighborhood had transformed. Wealthy newcomers, drawn by the lake's beauty, built sprawling mansions and gated estates. With them came the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, HOA, a group that promised to elevate the community with rules, regulations, and ambitious projects. At first, I didn't mind the HOA. They planted flowers along the roads, organized community cleanups, and seemed harmless enough. But as their influence grew, so did their arrogance. The trouble began when the HOA announced their grand vision, a $4 million luxury resort on the southern shore of Lake Serenity. They called it Serenity Shores, a gated enclave with private docks, a clubhouse, and exclusive access to the lake. The plan was pitched as a boon for property values, but it came at a cost. The resort required expanding the southern shore, which meant rerouting the road and demolishing the old wooden bridge. The same bridge my grandfather had helped build. I protested at the HOA meetings. That bridge is part of our history, I argued. It's not just a crossing, it connects us all. But the HOA board, led by the smug and impeccably dressed Cynthia Hargrove, dismissed my concerns. "Progress requires sacrifice, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her smile dripping with condescension. "The resort will benefit everyone, not just a few nostalgic holdouts." The community was divided. Some residents, dazzled by the promise of rising property values, supported the resort. Others, like me, saw it as a betrayal of Willow Creek's soul. But the HOA had the votes, the lawyers, and the money. The bridge was torn down, replaced by a sleek modern overpass that bypassed my family's land entirely. The resort's construction began, and with it, my resentment grew. The spark of revenge. The destruction of the bridge was personal. It wasn't just about nostalgia, it was about respect. My family had given this community Lake Serenity, and the HOA treated us like an inconvenience. They ignored my warnings about the dam's maintenance, dismissed my requests for input on the resort's impact on the lake's ecosystem, and even tried to pressure me into selling my land for a fair price, far below its true value. I wasn't the only one frustrated. My neighbor, Maria Gonzalez, a retired schoolteacher who'd lived in Willow Creek for 30 years, was furious about the resort's exclusive docks. "They're turning our lake into a playground for the rich," she said one evening as we sat on my porch, watching construction cranes loom over the horizon. "What's next? Fencing off the water so only their members can use it?" Maria's words stuck with me. The HOA's greed wasn't just about the bridge, it was about control. They wanted to privatize Lake Serenity, to turn a shared resource into a gated luxury. I couldn't let that happen. But fighting the HOA through legal channels was a losing battle. Their lawyers were sharks, and my savings couldn't match their war chest. I needed another way. That's when the idea hit me. The dam. My family owned it, and I controlled its gates. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. I could drain the lake. The thought was reckless, even dangerous. Draining lake. Serenity would devastate the resort, leaving their $4 million investment a muddy wasteland. It would also hurt the community, families who loved the lake, kids who fished off the docks, and neighbors who'd done nothing wrong. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like justice. The HOA had destroyed something I loved. Why shouldn't I return the favor? The plan takes. Shape draining the lake wasn't as simple as flipping a switch. The dam's gates were old, manually operated, and hadn't been fully opened in decades. I spent weeks researching, consulting old engineering manuals my grandfather had left behind, and discreetly inspecting the dam's mechanisms. The main gate, a massive steel slab, controlled the flow of water into the river below. Opening it would release the lake's contents in a matter of hours, turning Serenity Shores into a dry basin. I also needed a trigger, something to justify my actions without implicating myself. The HOA had already given me plenty of ammunition. Their construction had disrupted the lake's ecosystem, sending sediment and debris into the water. They'd ignored my warnings about runoff, and the lake was starting to look murky, like Thanksgiving gravy, as one neighbor put it. I could claim the dam needed emergency maintenance, that I had to open the gates to prevent a catastrophic failure. It wasn't entirely a lie. Neglect could lead to real problems down the line. I confided in Maria and a few trusted neighbors, forming a small circle of allies. There was Tom, a gruff mechanic who'd been fined by the HOA for leaving his boat trailer in his driveway. Sarah, a single mom who'd clashed with Cynthia over her unapproved garden. And Jamal, a retired engineer who knew the dam's mechanics almost as well as I did. They were skeptical at first. "You're talking about wiping out the lake, Ethan," Jamal said, his brow furrowed. "That's not just revenge, it's war." "I know," I replied. "But they started it. They took the bridge. They're taking the lake. If we don't fight back, what's left?" Maria nodded. "I'm in. But we need to be smart. The HOA will come after you with everything we devised a plan. I'd open the dam's gates under the guise of emergency repairs, citing rallying the lake to a safe level for maintenance. Meanwhile, Maria and the others would spread the word about the necessary work, planting seeds of doubt about the HOA's negligence. We'd frame it as a public safety measure, not an act of sabotage. The key was timing. Open the gates during a heavy rain, when no one would question the sudden drop in water levels. The night of the flood. The opportunity came in late spring, when a massive storm was forecast to hit Willow Creek. The rain would mask the sound of the dam's gates and give me a plausible excuse. As thunder rumbled in the distance, I headed to the dam alone, my heart pounding. The old control room smelled of rust and damp wood. I checked the gauges, oiled the gate mechanism, and waited for the storm to break. At midnight, the sky opened up. Rain poured in sheets and lightning illuminated the lake's choppy surface. I turned the heavy wheel, and the gate groaned to life. Water roared through the opening, a churning torrent that shook the dam's foundation. I watched from the control room window as Lake Serenity began to shrink, its edges creeping inward like a receding tide. By morning, the lake was half its size. The resort's private docks sat on dry land, surrounded by mud and stranded fish. Serenity Shores looked like a post-apocalyptic wasteland, its manicured lawns caked in silt, its clubhouse marooned in a sea of sludge. I closed the gates before the lake drained completely, leaving just enough water to avoid permanent damage. The resort was ruined, but the community's access to the lake could be restored with time and effort. I wanted to send a message, not destroy everything. The HOA's reaction was swift and furious. Cynthia Hargrove stormed to my cabin that afternoon, her face red with rage. "You did this, Caldwell," she shouted, jabbing a finger at me. "You sabotaged our resort." "Sabotaged?" I said, feigning innocence. "I opened the gates to prevent a dam failure. The storm could have caused a collapse. You should be thanking me." "You expect me to believe that? The resort is ruined. Millions of dollars gone." I shrugged. "Maybe you should have listened when I warned you about the runoff. The lake's been a mess since your construction started." Cynthia's eyes narrowed, but she had no proof. The emergency maintenance story held up, especially with Maria and the others backing me. They'd spent the morning talking to neighbors, emphasizing the HOA's negligence and my heroic efforts to save the dam. The community was divided. Some were outraged, others suspicious of the HOA's mismanagement. The legal battle that followed was brutal. The HOA sued me for damages, claiming I'd acted without authorization. I countersued, arguing their construction had endangered the dam and forced my hand. Jamal's expertise as an engineer was invaluable. His testimony about the dam's neglected state swayed the judge. The court ruled in my favor, citing the HOA's failure to address runoff issues as a contributing factor. They were ordered to pay for the lake's restoration and my legal fees. Serenity Shores never recovered. The resort's investors pulled out, and the half-built clubhouse became a crumbling monument to the HOA's hubris.